in terms of the way democracy works, generally politicians find it very difficult to think beyond the next election. So now you're bringing a message that encourages people to think 20, 30 years ahead. Do you think that there's a clash with democracy in that kind of thinking, that kind of long-term thinking, and would it?
Actually, it's not a problem at all. In fact, it's completely consistent with the warped way that our leaders think. Because all I'm asking them to do is to enable the next generation to think rationally. In other words, I'm allowing them to continue being gluttons and to continue eating, provided they bind the next generation to behaving rationally and in taking care and interest of generations that come after that. I recognize that it's very, very difficult to change the mindset of this present generation political leaders, but they can bind generations that come after them.
Basically, split the decision between the government, who is giving the money, and the people who are taking responsibility for their lives. In terms of, and I've heard this by the current president's special advisor on poverty, something about Nigeria trying to import Bolsa Familia, which was the Brazilian plan, bringing it to Nigeria. What are your thoughts on that in terms of putting that side by side with either giving people money or actually just building water systems for them?
I think you have to do a bit of both. I mean, one, you need service delivery for health, for education, water supply, so you've got to do that. On the other hand, you've got to empower people. And, cash transfers should be seen as empowerment, conditional because, you have a number of barriers for girls going to school, stigmatization of those with HIV, immunization. So those conditionalities to cash transfers, but you must exit a cash transfer. It's not about just giving money for a period of time to get people into school. And so it's important that what we did with the conditional cash transfer, whether we're going to import or not import, we've been doing conditional cash transfers in Nigeria for a while. We need to scale them up. And what we did was to say that let's give a certain amount of money to a family so that they can survive and they can send their children to school. They can send them for basic health services. At the same time, teach them a skill that has a market. The other half of the money is saved for them. When they finish that skill, you give them that money to empower. So it's the capital to start their businesses, and they exit. So you're not just about giving them money to make sure they go to school. No, you're giving a skill, you're giving the capital, they exit, they start their business, and they're able to take over some of those burdens for which we were giving some stipends to begin with. So I think we need to examine them well, and we need to find a balance between what has to be service delivery, but empowerment of people, especially our women and young girls.
It's easy to get discouraged when you look at the macro level. So you take a country like Nigeria, there's so many moving parts, so many things, everything that can go wrong probably goes wrong. How do you disconnect yourself from that macro level and then plug in to the micro level and just focus on what you're doing and try to get stuff fixed? Because it's hard. I imagine that there are a lot of other people who want to do it, but they look at the big picture, get scared, and then just walk back.
Well, I think everyone has a sphere of influence, and to be a leader, you have to focus on your sphere of influence. And so if you zero in on that sphere of influence, starting with your home, your community, your church, your company, your school, then you can see those little changes happening. That's the first thing I do, is really just zero in on that sphere of influence. The second thing is really to surround yourself with other change agents. At LEAP, the vision was that one person can't change our country, one person can't change our continent, but if we have thousands of people who share the same values and are committed to the same thing, then we can start a movement. And as you know, most movements that have changed the world didn't happen overnight. It's a sprint, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And that's why I ended with that quote about going far with others. And so I think channeling that. And then the third thing is, you need to find mentors, you need to find champions, people who are cheerleaders. Whenever you want to give up, they kind of say, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Over time, though, what we have to start doing more is trying to change policy. That's why I mentioned the local food content bill. Because the truth is, you can start a couple of small businesses, but unless you have large-scale policy changes that create a level playing field for local producers in the agribusiness space, you won't see the radical change required in our food landscape. So those type of things, policy changes are critical. Even with LEAD, we're trying to get the government to adopt our curriculum as part of national curriculum. So instead of reaching thousands, we can reach millions. And I think those are the type of things that will cause those large-scale changes that are required.
You're a facilitator of enterprise in Africa. What is the future going to be in terms of what sectors, what areas, where are you betting on for Africa?
Well, so for Acumen, what we look at is not just growth, because growth without equity is not going to get us where we need to go as a world. And so for Acumen, we look at those services that serve the poor. Healthcare, agriculture, water, electricity, increasingly mobile, particularly when the mobile is used as a platform for bringing services to the poor. I think that solar really has the potential to be the next cell phone. As I watch the price of solar going down, we've got a company called D-Light, and it's just past the mark where 10 million people now have light that they're paying for from D-Light. It was started in California and started distribution in India, but it's growing faster in Africa than anywhere else. So I would say first solar, agriculture, absolutely. And in agriculture, what excites me are new models, particularly those that use the nucleus farm approach and have smallholders on the side, so that we're not overly romanticizing the farmer, nor are we saying it's only about commercial agriculture. And it's finding those nuances that I think, are so critical.
The way of saying stand for something or you fall for nothing. I think
that's a smart way of saying it.
I think that's the message I give.
It's one of the contradictions, the paradox of an idealist. If you don't transcend reality, then you're not being an idealist. You have to transcend reality. On the other hand, if you're divorced from reality, the ideas are meaningless. So you don't deny the paradox, you live with the paradox. And you try to manage the paradox and get an energy from it and intellectual creativity from that paradox, the tension between the imagined, the ideal, the beautiful on the one hand, and the real that can be sordid, hard, diminishing on the other, and constant toing and froing between the two.
In a country like South Africa, where there's been so much hatred and division, and what is your take or what is your recommendation for, as the society starts to move forward, how do you think people should vent and let off steam? What is the best way? What's the best way?
The first thing that comes to mind. Let me ask you to guess the biggest growth industry in South Africa. Stand-up comedians. It's amazing. And
Okay, that was a good one.
They're from every community.
Okay.
And they're not scared. They trample on toes all the time, but not in a nasty, vicious way. It's not through putting people down. It's laughing at ourselves, laughing at our prejudices. Let the tensions in the society come out through humor. That's one of the freedom of speech, interaction is definitely one of the most important foundations for creating. It's more than tolerance in the sense of acknowledging and submitting to something. It's respecting others, listening to others, not being afraid to speak your mind. I think that's central. And then integrity, honesty of leadership. You can make mistakes. You can make almost every mistake under the sun. But if the people feel at least you're trying honestly, they will give you lots of scope. There'll be enormous patience. But if they feel you're cheating, you're on the take, you're manipulating and lying, then they get impatient, and then things can go badly wrong.
What's been the best and most encouraging thing about what you do? In terms of not just Kenya now, but all over Africa, what's been the most encouraging thing? What's the thing that if you were to ever go in a different direction totally, what would be that one thing that will pull you back and say, what, give this another try?
I think it's our stories and the things that we have to say and the crazy story behind the Nigerian movies, or I think it's like we have so much. There's so many things and experiences that we have to offer the world, and we have so many like creative expressions that we haven't even tapped into. So every time I think that, oh, maybe I'm going to a place that there may not be enough technology or electricity, I'm constantly blown away. I'm always a person. You see, the thing is, like, I think African digital art was really me building a seat for me to have a seat to see all this amazing stuff that's happening. So I can't leave it. There's no way. It fuels me. It fuels my artwork. It fuels, my life and the things and the projects that I do. So yeah.
What's the best progress you've seen? Say, if we restrict it to say 2012, in terms of the unlinking of opportunity with gender. What's the best progress you've seen? Or maybe not just 2012, but recently.
I was going to say there's been progress, but I mean there has been, but I think in some ways it's one step forward and then there's two steps back. So there are more women, for example. I think we're more comfortable with women in positions of authority in Nigeria, right? But I also think that while we have these women in positions of public authority, I think that privately, just the pressure, there are lots of women they're well educated, they have opportunities, but their goal in life is to get married. So they will manipulate and because they have to get married. And I think it's terrible. I think, and in some ways it's not a question of blaming them, it's because of the society we live in, So in some ways I think it's mixed. It's that we have, we usually pull out, look at Okonjo-Iweala, look at Dora Akunyili, right? Look at Obi Ezekwesili. And we're very proud of all of that, as I am. And I wish more women would run for public office. But I think for me, I'm much more interested in the thing that happens at home. Because I think that's the way we think about ourselves is what will, yeah.
And obviously, the final question, I have to take you up on that. Are you going to run for office? At some point, not now, not tomorrow, not 10 years time.
Very often I think to myself, of course I'm going to, right? Because you see what's happening in Nigeria and you just think, how hard can it be? So I'm like, I'm going to go there, I will not steal money, I will show them that we can actually, but then, in the end I'm a writer. I'm like, what makes me happy? To be alone in my study writing. And if I ran for governor, I would not attend all the meetings because I'd be like, I have to go and write. So I'm not sure I'm a good candidate for public office.
Have you looked to any writers who've made a cross from
yes,
writing
it hasn't
to...
been good.
What's going to happen for you in 2013? I mean, professional wise now. I mean, in terms of the music, you're known as a great beat maker. You turn out great songs. Everyone likes your music. What's going to happen? What have you got planned for 2013?
I think that a number of things are going to happen for me. I feel like in my life, I'm at a point where I've done one thing for too long, and I've sat around and grown fat in my comfort zone. So I'm just sort of breaking out of the box right now and trying to do other things, as opposed to just producing musicians. I'm concentrating on nurturing and developing and exposing artists, which is pretty much what we're doing with Bez. You may or may not have heard about him. Bez he's a phenomenal artist, and we also have two others, Stan Ike and Phil, who pretty much have that Nigerian export, an amazing, entirely different, off the beaten path, off the popular sound, but proudly Nigerian at the same time sound. So I'm happy to be working on those sounds and just introducing them to the rest of the world. I've also been working on my own album project, which is something I sort of put back burner for a long time. But I'm bringing it out because I feel the leading in my heart to do so now, to work on something that expresses me musically. And so I'm working on my album project, which hopefully comes out in 2013. And I guess there are many other things. I'm working on being a better father, being a better husband, and I think that's just as important as whatever else I do professionally. So.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, finally, one last question. Longer term, is there what challenge, what obstacle, what barrier have you got in your sights, to put it that way, to take down?
I think for me, we've made great music and we're happy about that, and we've realized that not just me, but thousands and thousands of Nigerians can make great music. I think for me, one of the biggest barriers and one of the things that I would like to see myself play a very integral role in bringing down is the structural issues that we have in entertainment in Nigeria. and in Africa in general, because while entertainment is a major revenue generator, a major contributor to national economy, or even on the African scale, I don't feel like we've created the structure to sustain it in terms of royalty system, in terms of awareness, in terms of policies that govern how intellectual property is created, is transferred, is marketed, is valued, and all of that. So for me, that's very important. And I think that those structural, foundational issues need to be dealt with. So I see myself slowly just sort of getting into that space where I'm able to help deal with those sort of issues, because someone's got to do it. It's more than just making great music. We've come to the point where we need to deal with the administrative issues, the IP issues, the legal issues, the government-related issues, the bills and the policies that will govern this very amazing opportunity for us as Africans.
Even though we've got 160 million people in Nigeria, we can actually build a business on people who are not in Nigeria. Do you think that this is the future, and where do you think that might take us?
I think, be under no illusion, the main market for Nollywood movies is in Nigeria. It is. The big bet is that at some point the access problem will be resolved, so we can really tap into that market. We are borrowing today from the diaspora, as far as I'm concerned. There's like 30.5 million people in the diaspora. There's like 30 million people in Lagos. So, you kind of gives you context of like what the scale of the market is. I've traveled across the whole of Africa over the last few years. And wherever I go, from Gambia to South Africa, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Ghana, they love Nollywood movies. So it shows you that within sort of that sub-Saharan Africa, there's a few hundred million people who love it. And I think the key thing for us is sort of find a way to tap into that. At the moment, access is slowing them down, but it's going to happen. 10 years ago, there was no mobile phones. Now there's like 700 million. These things just take time.
Do you think they don't appreciate how much better things might have been are today for them than they were for their parents? Or do you get that sometimes that, as part of, while they might have an overarching message that speaks about their frustrations and their desires for change, do you think there's an element of young people not appreciating that things have changed, progress has been made, and it was because their parents made some sacrifices in certain circumstances, even though maybe they might have made wrong decisions? In short, do we neglect the good and always focus on the bad?
Yeah. Well, I think they realize that there is some that is good, but at the same time, I think that you have a younger generation that is a lot more demanding because it is better connected to the rest of the world through internet, through television, new technologies of information and communication. And they can measure the gap between their limited opportunities that they experience in everyday life and what they perceive to be possible elsewhere in the world. So their aspirations are much higher. They're demanding a lot more. And it's true also that our own societies are struggling, with situations of conflict, disease, HIV, and poor management of the economy, the result of all these structural adjustment policies and neoliberal policies that have some produced growth, but it's a growth that is, the economy is improving, but it's not reflecting in people's pockets, in the changing the lives of people. And most of them are really struggling. And you know that they are the majority. So it's a larger group in today's world facing those challenges. And so I don't think it's a lack of appreciation, but it's a lived experience of the present in the context of the situation we're living today.